Welcome to today's panel, Black Disabled Lives Matter. My name is Nancy Forsyth. I'm a disability program specialist here at the University of Maryland and your host for this evening. I'd like to ask Lynn Powell, Associate Director for Professional Preparation at the University Career Center, to say hello.
Greetings. On behalf of the University of Maryland, University Career Center, and the President's Promise, we welcome each of you this evening. We're grateful that you decided to join us to hear from our expert panelists about the Black Disabled Lives Matter movement. Though I'm sure you all know Nancy well, I'd be remiss if we did not start by thanking her for ensuring that this event happened this evening. We're grateful for all of Nancy's work on our campus, but particularly in support of career development for students with disabilities, and as her role as an educator and a bridge builder on our campus and within the community at large. So again, thank you, Nancy. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you for all of you who've joined us this evening, and let's have a wonderful event.
Thanks, Lynn. Kenyatta, can you switch to the next slide, please? I want to welcome you all and first remind you that this event is being recorded. We're asking you to keep your video cameras off because of the volume of participants we will have, as well as to keep our recording going smoothly. I would like to introduce our panelists, but first let me say a big thank you to our sponsors, Employability at UMD, the University of Maryland Counseling Center, the President's Commission on Disability Issues, and anonymous donors who have made this event possible this evening. We've received both financial and in-kind support from our sponsors, and we're deeply grateful for their support of this important program. We have a few other housekeeping logistics. Let me get to those. We do have an ASL interpreter available. Do I need to provide the names of the interpreters?
Our interpreters are listed under their names. So ASL interpreter Shirley, and then our other interpreter is Caitlin Wolford. So they will be pinned throughout the duration of the event today, but they will be switching off a little later, okay?
Thanks. And so let me introduce to you Kenyatta Malloy, who is the Career Events Coordinator at the University Career Center, and of course has made this event possible as well. Our event is being captioned, as I'm sure you noticed. And in the chat is the stream text link if you prefer to view the captioning there. I think tonight the way that we will proceed is to have our three panelists speak, and then we will move to questions and answers. Let's try and use the chat for those because we do expect a relatively large audience, and so raising hands and trying to do Q&A that way verbally will be a little difficult. So let's use chat for questions and answers. I want to introduce our panelists, and then I'll provide a little bit of framing for our panel tonight. Our first speaker will be Carrie Gray. Carrie Gray is the founder and the CEO of the Carrie Gay Group and a founder of the National Alliance of Multicultural Disabled Advocates. Carrie's work centers on exploring the intersections of race, gender, and disability across the workplace. She works with companies and organizations so they are prepared to leverage intersectionality as a business practice. Through her various roles, Carrie has recruited approximately 4,000 young professionals for over 100 Fortune 500 companies and organizations. She has also designed and managed programs for over 1,000 young professionals that have helped her students secure competitive employment, build an influential network, and gain notable opportunities. We'll hear then from Jen White Johnson, who is a disabled designer, photographer, art activist, and art educator. Currently, she teaches as an assistant professor of visual communication at Bowie State University, where her work focuses on the intersection of content and caregiving, with an emphasis on redesigning ableist visual culture. When her son was diagnosed as autistic at age 2, she began to examine the absence of Black disabled children in digital and literary media. This motivated the release of an advocacy photozine entitled Rocks Knocks. Dedicated to her autistic son, the zine is a way to give visibility to children of color in the Black autistic community. As an artist educator with Graves' disease and ADHD, her heart-centered and electric approach to disability advocacy bolsters these movements with invaluable currencies, powerful dynamic art and media that at once educate, bridge divergent worlds, and build a future that mirrors her autistic son's experience. Since its release, the zine has achieved national and international recognition, including features in Afro-Punk and Today at Apple. And it is permanently archived in libraries at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the National Museum of Women in the Arts. This year, her activist work has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Crip Camp, the official virtual experience, and she was recently selected as an honoree on the 2020 Disabilities D30 Disability Impact list. Jen holds an MFA in graphic design from the Maryland Institute College of Art and a BA in visual arts from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And our next speaker is Brandon Harris. Brandon so bravely and so generously stepped in at the last minute when we had a cancellation late this afternoon. So we're extremely grateful to Brandon for his participation. Brandon joined the Department of Fraternity and Sorority Life at UMD in the summer of 2019. He is the inaugural coordinator for residential experience for the Department of Fraternity and Sorority Life. He completed his undergraduate coursework at Indiana State University in business management, where he became a proud and active member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. And he received his master's degree in college student personnel services and administration from the University of Central Arkansas. Brandon shows up to the panel as a queer, differently abled Black man. He was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome on March 1, 2016. This is a neurological disorder in which the body's immune system attacks the body's nervous system. Brandon will speak to us today about his experience. Okay, last but not least, let me give you a little overview of what we expect tonight and how we'd like to see the evening progress. The topic of Black disabled matters is a groundbreaking topic. It's one that we just don't fully address. We keep it at arm's length, but it's one that we must interrogate and challenge thoroughly if we want to create racial justice and disability justice. Tonight, our speakers will address the way in which the social inequalities of race and disability live in and through each other in what is commonly called an intersection. We will observe, learn about, and embrace the intersection of race and disability tonight. But our panelists will speak as well to the inequalities of gender and LGBTQ identity as inseparable, like race and disability, from what we need to change in order to achieve an inclusive, empathetic, and just society for Black people, disabled people, for all people. The themes we will explore through these intersections are 3: care, bravery, resilience. You're about to hear from 3 of the most caring, the bravest, the most resilient people. Their stories of living the intersection of race, disability, gender, and LGBTQ identity will demonstrate these values and, moreover, model their embodiment in pursuit of that inclusive, empathetic, and just society. So let's hear from them. Kerry, take it away.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. At this point in time, I think a million of us have been on Zoom calls all the time. And with that, technology is great and sometimes it's not. So I say that at any point, if my sound is a little off or something needs to be hired or whatever the case may be, just let me know. Happy to try to adjust so folks can hear me. But one, I want to say thank you to Nancy and the whole UMD crew for inviting me back out to speak on a topic that I'm very passionate about. And that is helping organizations build leadership across communities of color at the intersection of health and wellness. So I found that there are several points in our career where we ask the question, how do I become successful? And oftentimes, there's a set of transferable skills that help build your leadership, regardless of what industry you're in. Building these skills, I find, often starts with your advocacy on a college campus. So as you're on a college campus and you could be running a student organization, you could be heading a department, leading a big project or initiative, and you can find yourself asking the questions of like, what does it take to build a vision for this project? How do I build a mission? How do I recruit and attract membership? How do I host events that people actually want to show up for? How do I collaborate with my team members and build partnerships with folks that are across campus? I think that as we're on this journey of figuring out all of these different skills that ultimately become transferable in the workplace, we find that you can be navigating how to also survive and ideally thrive as a Black person with physical and mental health conditions. And so that adds this additional layer of I'm trying to be successful. I'm trying to build something that's very positive for my community. And I have to be in tune with navigating Blackness and systems that just quite frankly weren't made for us. And I have to acknowledge that staying healthy takes more for me. So I identify as a Black woman with disabilities. I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma bone cancer when I was 8 years old. I was going through chemotherapy. I was pretty much living in the hospital for a lot of my elementary school year. I ended up getting an amputation on my right leg. So I have a prosthetic limb that I've grown up wearing, and I also have hearing loss. And when I came out of that experience, I found that I was navigating what it means to be this Black girl growing up in the South. And shout out to all my people who are from the South right now. It is incredibly rich culture when you think of that Southern slang, when you think of the ways in which we greet each other, that Southern hospitality. There's so much about the South that I love and appreciate. And at the same time, that as a young person, I also quite literally grew up on the other side of the railroad tracks. And so for anyone that knows what that means, it means that the environments in which you live, the economic and social positioning of those neighborhoods give you access to less things and less quality. I also remember traveling to Tuscaloosa, Alabama every year to see my grandparents, and we actively avoided certain cities because we knew how they treated Black folks. Navigating the workplace is also another issue. I noticed the ways that folks would look at me because of the way that I look, the way in which I talk. My overall Blackness can make people feel uncomfortable off top. So when we're in these professional networks and they see this woman with a prosthetic limb, they may notice my hearing loss, and it starts to present these series of questions around how much can this person do and how much can we collaborate together? What does it look like for me to send this woman into a meeting to take notes and to speak on our behalf if I don't know if she's going to hear everything that's said in the meeting? What does it mean when I want to build a team that has urgent, pressing deadlines, and I don't know if people with physical disabilities can even operate out of a sense of urgency? And I find that we're on this journey of trying to figure out what does it mean, like how do we disclose parts of who we are in the midst of us trying to be successful? So I find that my journey has been this
like intersectional experience of trying to figure out the professional world, trying to figure out how do I run programs and initiatives, how do I be great in the midst of me navigating these very personal dynamics of being a Black woman with disabilities. So if I may, today I would love for our goal to be to create space so that we can better understand this conversation of intersectionality. Disability prevalence is highest in communities of color. So if we know that it is inevitable that we will interact with people of color with disabilities, so people who have autism, learning disabilities, mental health conditions, physical disabilities, and we know that these folks are incredible at what they do. We hired them for a reason. We admitted them to college for a reason. So we know that they bring talent to our organizations, to our various programs, projects, and initiatives. Then I think the question is, how do we create workspaces? How do we create campus environments that are inclusive and accessible? All right, so let's dig into that a little bit. So I want to start by describing the status quo, by addressing this topic that tends to come up that says you can be Black, but not too Black. Okay. And so the first thing that I'll mention is I've had the pleasure of running several programs for mostly college students. And there was this one program in particular where we were on top of our game. I was working with a group of students who we've been preparing for months to meet and network with a wide range of recruitment and hiring managers. All of my students had disabilities. Many of them were students of color. All of us were hungry for our shots. I mean, I'm not playing when I say there was an uncontainable fire in us to show ourselves, our family, the whole world, to be quite frank, that we could do anything that we set our minds to. And I have to express that we were beyond motivated to lean into the work. Many of us have spent our lives running from the diagnosis of disability, or even just the label of disability. Many of us have spent way too much time experiencing the repercussions of living in low-income Black neighborhoods where we had less access to quality groceries, to quality resources. That access was just low. And in our minds, although we may not be able to change the systemic barriers that we were experiencing overnight, we were old enough to know that opportunities were available, even for those of us living at the intersections of race and disability. And we were young enough to put in every ounce of our strength that we could muster just to get an introduction to those recruitment managers. So when I say we were working for them opportunities, we were working for them opportunities. So I remember it was the final evening of the program, and I gave a presentation around the power of hiring young, diverse talent. I looked in the eyes of every one of my students and I poured our hearts out. I amplified our hard labor for the whole room to see. Afterwards, I'm happy to say that 3 CEOs came up to shake my hand, and they were excited to share that they wanted to work with this next generation of talent. About half the employers in the room were conducting interviews with our students. We were, we were doing our thing. And, in the midst of that, there was this one comment that stood out to me, and it still lives with me today. A company representative came up to me and said, "Carrie, you shouldn't use the word dope in your presentations." And just for anyone who may not be familiar with the slang term dope is another word. I see you, Jen. Dope is another word of saying, I like that. I love that. We say it all the time. That's dope right there. And so this representative came up to me and she said, it sends a bad impression to your students and it reflects poorly on your organization. And she felt so strongly about it that she wanted to speak to my supervisors about my use of language. So I'm a fairly confident person, but for some reason, when I heard that comment, I was just really disappointed. Because let's be honest, the comment was a direct critique of my Blackness and the way in which it displayed both in the workplace and as a representation of someone worth admiration and respect. They wanted me to silence my Blackness. And what's interesting about that comment is that there had been so many presentations before me where my colleagues and other professionals had used other types of slang such as awesome and rock star and terms that more naturally fit in white dominated workplaces. But I find that too often that we still have professionals and leaders that directly and indirectly say you can be Black, but not too Black. And I've also found that professionals those of us that are living on the intersections of race and disability are held to professional expectations, but we are also often critiqued on intangible things often related to respectability politics, code switching. So code switching involves adjusting one's style of speech, appearance, behavior, and expression in ways that will optimize the comfort of others in exchange for fair treatment, quality service, and employment opportunities. I would also argue that code switching includes admitting details from conversations, right? So if you've ever been in a scenario where you're having this open conversation about something in your life and you say, oh, wait, mixed audience, can't go too far with this. And I find that to be that resonates very deeply as a person with a disability, talking about medical conditions in the workplace. It's very common that, you could be working with your colleagues, you could be chatting with folks that you're working on a project in, and someone mentions, I got to go to a dentist appointment. Oh, I'm pregnant, I'm having issues with XYZ. Like these types of things come up in the workplace, in a work environment. But if you talk about medical stuff with people with disabilities, it's a whole nother lane. We start talking about the 15 different doctors that we've been to. We start talking about all the different procedures that we've been through and the different types of medications that are out and experimental. We start talking about procedures that doctors have recommended that only make us more able-bodied, but don't actually address our symptoms. It's a whole world. And what's interesting is that those types of conversations can bring you closer to some of your colleagues and they can alienate you from others. So I've seen the scenarios where it brings back those questions of, dang, like this person got a lot going on with their health. Like, I don't know if it's a wise idea for me to bring them into opportunities if they're managing all of that. What's unfortunate about this situation is that when we are constantly having to assess if we're using the most respectable phrases, if we're wearing correct professional styles, if we're wearing heels instead of sneakers, if we are holding back on the respect that we have for disabled bodies, it impacts our confidence in the workplace. I have to say it is the accumulation of constantly being corrected and assessed by the organizational culture that wears down the diversity of our team. Our goal should be having a team that is constantly building social capital instead of alienating others. A quote by the Harvard Business Journal says, every manager knows that business runs better when people within an organization know and trust one another. Deals move faster and more smoothly, teams are more productive, people learn more quickly and perform more creatively. Strong relationships are the grease of an organization. Business can be done without them, but not for long and not very well. I think another thing that we're seeing from particularly this generation of millennials and Generation Z that's coming up into the workplace is that we are continuously more and more diverse. We are seeking environments where our culture is not dismissed or simply tolerated, but rather it is a natural part of the organization. So I think that brings us to another question. What sort of support can employers or organizational leaders, and that includes student organizations, can give people of color with disabilities so we can not only survive in the workplace, but genuinely be part of the makeup of the organizational culture? I'm going to give a couple of recommendations. One, I want to say foster internal conversations around race and disability. All right, so follow me on this real quick. So there was a story about a middle school sexual health teacher. And during the first week of class, she would have her students chant and sing songs that had the name of genital parts in them. She did this because she knew there was no way she could teach about sexual health and the growth of our bodies if her students were busted into uncomfortable, nervous laughter, making jokes about each other, poking fun every time the name of a body part came up, right? They had to get used to saying those words and having conversations about their evolving bodies in order to effectively learn and take care of themselves, right? Well, likewise, I see you, Victoria. Likewise, I would also say it's critical that our organizations are able to have conversations about dialogue about race, disability, our bodies, and how these experiences intersect with each other and impact our organizational culture. And we should allow our unique experiences to foster innovation. Ellis Coase, who is an author of several books about race and public policy, found that business leaders often don't engage in explicit discussion about race. She also found that this was impacting the behavior and conversation of other employees, and specifically young Black professionals who one day want to be senior leadership. They adopted the methodology of those who came before them and started to remain silent about things like race and inequality and disability to avoid being labeled agitators. But I think one thing that we know, that trying to avoid culture, trying to avoid the world that we live in today, that is filled with Black people being killed by state violence, that is filled with employment discrimination of people with disabilities, is not helping anyone. It may be uncomfortable for some folks. I mean, it may be more comfortable for some folks to not talk about it, but it's not helping. I think we understand when folks from mostly marginalized background bring their full identities to work, it can bring a set of stories that are both painful and powerful. It's critical that we create safe environments and develop the skill set. It's definitely a skill set to have conversations around race, disability, and intersectionality. I think finally, I would be remiss to say that employers, and again, including organizations, must re-examine our recruitment and hiring practices, our membership processes. So a study by the Center for Talent Innovation on being Black in corporate America found that racial prejudice in the workplace underpins low representation at the top. So I'm about to go through a few statistics to kind of showcase like what this disparity looks like at the intersection of race and disability. I do want to note that a lot of these numbers are pre-COVID. So as we're going through this global pandemic, we'll need to kind of re-examine what that means about the workplace. But generally speaking, when we're not in a global pandemic, these numbers have been pretty consistent. So that being said, only 3.2% of executives and senior level employees are Black. And there are only 5 Fortune 500 CEOs. Black men are paid 13% less than white men. Black women are paid 39% less than white men and 21% less than white women. Black women are less likely to have access to the same support and advocacy as white women. For instance, 35% of white women have had individuals in their network advocate for their ideas and skills compared to 19% of Black women. According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, 19.3% of people with disabilities are in the labor force. In contrast, the employment population ratio for people with disabilities is 66.3%. I want to explain that one for a second. So there's a difference between unemployment and being in the labor force. Unemployment means that typically you work, but you may be experiencing a season that could last weeks, that could last months, that could last a couple of years, where you're experiencing unemployment. The labor force is about you being a qualified individual who is working in general, right? And so this number shows that 19% of people with disabilities are in the labor force. That means the other about 80% people of disabilities are not even being counted as someone that is employable. That's huge, that's significant. I'll also point out that among people with disabilities, Black folks have a higher unemployment rate of 11.8% than the Hispanic Latinx community at 8.6%, Asian community at 6.7%, and white disabled folks at 6.6%, right? So when I was younger, I didn't know the exact numbers of, what I would be facing and how incredibly hard it would be to be successful. But I knew it was going to be hard, particularly economically successful as a Black woman with disabilities. But I knew I wanted to look those statistics in the face and say, not me. Me and my people are going to create new spaces, new opportunities, and say that our contributions matter. I knew 100% that these statistics do not have to be our future. So overall, we have an opportunity before us. At this day and time, folks are not only asking to understand intersectionality, but they are demanding that the fullness of their identities be included in our social, political, and economic practices. The opportunity is that we can meet that demand and we can be better organizations for it. And I think it's important to be honest. It's not possible for me to be an overnight success, right? I can't wake up tomorrow and be a millionaire as much as I very much want to. It takes going through the process. And as I've built many programs and initiatives and now in business, I've had to be willing to build things from the ground up. I've had to be vulnerable and ask for help, be willing to learn from others so I don't have to start from scratch. That hunger for success never goes away. I believe in my ability and I believe in the ability of my community to be successful. So I want to leave you with a quote. On the job, I think about this. Must I hide my curves and my fro, or right now my dreads and my prosthetic scars? Can I bring the melanin of my culture and the slower limp of my walk to work? Though not discussed enough, these are the questions that young professionals ask every time they do a job interview, or when they move to elevate their careers. How much do I share? How much do I hide? I believe now is the time to transform our employment settings. I believe our success is heightened when we acknowledge our personal and social dynamics have an impact on our professional aspirations. It is a profitable investment to feed into our whole selves. I'm a professional who is Black, who is a woman, and who is disabled. And that level of inclusivity will foster the impact of our organizations for years to come. All right, with that, I want to say thank you and pass it back to Nancy.
Whoa, Carrie, thank you. Takes a minute to breathe after that. I would encourage people to begin to put questions in the chat. We want to be able to hear from as many of you as possible. So if Carrie prompted something in your heart and in your mind, as she did for me, please let's start getting it in the chat so we can get a conversation going. Now I would like to turn it over to Jen White Johnson, who will share her presentation for us on her imagery and her graphic design.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for holding space for me today. Thank you, Carrie. That was amazing. So many gems were dropped. So I really hope that everybody was just super attentive and like in tune with what Carrie was saying, because it's so, so important. We need to be able to show up and exist in these spaces as our true authentic selves. And it really starts with, the workplace, on our campuses, in our homes. And I'm really going to be speaking today as an educator, a disabled educator, a disabled parent, and then also an activist and a care worker as well. So a quick physical description of myself for anyone who's vision impaired. I am an Afro Latina woman. I have like brown cinnamon skin. I have a gap in my teeth, and I have curly brown hair, and I'm wearing a shirt that actually says Black. It's kind of hard to see, but it says Black Disabled Lives Matter. And I'm actually going to show like some of these designs that I'm rocking today, and that, you know, that I was able to really create this past summer to just uplift and amplify the Black disability movement. So I'm so happy. Thank you, Nancy, and for UMD for just assembling this crew of folks. We have a lot to say. So thank you again for holding space. And my pronouns are she, her. And so I'm actually gonna share my screen. I'm an artist, so you know, it's so important that like I have like, you know, just a whole bunch of visual samples to kind of guide you through like my journey. All right, so I'm gonna share my screen really quickly. So can everyone see? All right.
Yes.
Yes, so I'm gonna go through these slides as quickly as I can, because I want to make sure that we have time for Q&A. So some stuff I'm just gonna go through like super fast, and then some slides, you know, I'm gonna spend, you know, just a few seconds on, just to kind of like give some visual context. But Afro-Latina caregiver, educator, disabled artist, and designer for collective liberation. Alrighty, hold on. Okay, so this is my visual anthem to the disability community, so get ready. Undiagnosed ADHD as a kid, you know, navigating into adulthood. I'm still, you know, really like trying to balance like the role of educator and parent. I teach at Bowie State University. This is actually me on campus doing a fun lecture on activism with my students. And I've never really lost that inner child that you see like on the left hand side. That's me at 8 years old. So a lot of like my teaching style and a lot of like what I hold space for is just true authenticity and fun, and just, you know, a lots of joy. And that's really what I try to bring into my practice as an artist. This is my son. This is Kevin, aka Knox. This was actually around the time that he was diagnosed as autistic. And you know, he's, you know, as you can see, he's just really carefree and just all about like just discovery and just enjoying life. This is him now on the right hand side, fully thriving. And so when he was, you know, diagnosed as autistic, you know, obviously a lot of Black families especially are, oh, he's not this and he's not that, and why are you trying to put this label on him, and why are you trying to shame him with this aspect of disability. And I was just really concerned about, you know, those stigmas that were even coming from, you know, the Black community, and then also, you know, mostly visibility of, we don't really see like, you know, positive just visuals of Black autistic children in media, or there's like this very cookie cutter like white face that, you know, amplifies just a very particular, you know, type of disabled person, you know. You know, and so I was really taken aback when really trying to understand, you know, how the community just viewed like Black disabled bodies, especially kids, you know, assuming that, oh, well, you know, he's just this wild child, and you need to get him in order, and you need to discipline him. And it's just like, I mean, and this is something that we often as Black and brown families have to really face, you know, and we're really like these stigmas are just a lot. And so I really like strayed away from what other very negative and very just comments, and, you know, from what people had to say. And I was really like, I really leaned on the disability community, specifically this tweet. You know, if your response to an autistic child is to make them less autistic, or at least appear to be less autistic, actually, I think that's a form of abuse in itself. So this is actually from Brooke Winters, who is a graphic novelist. She's based in the UK. I followed her a lot in the beginning when I was really trying to understand, you know, like, you know, autistic disability, folks that were just really honest and authentic about just sharing, you know, their actual autistic voices. And so this is, you know, a typical Black autistic kid, you know, in case y'all were wondering, like, they are full of joy, they're bright, they're beautiful, they're happy. They're not always, you know, crying and upset. And I mean, we need to really uplift and amplify them. And so again, these were some of the things that I was reading, when my son was first diagnosed, even well into his, after he had been diagnosed, within like the second or third year, and we were getting, we were, he was in speech therapy, and we were, working on these really integrative bonding activities. And I was reading things like this, it was like really upsetting, parents poisoning their kids, bleaching their kids to cure, quote unquote, cure their kids from autism. And these are things that are introduced at an early level. So you're basically telling your kid, you're broken, you need to be fixed, and I do not accept you the way that you, magically were created. And then I was continuing to research, wow, like Black and autism, like the Black autistic community, like what are some of the things, what are some of the ways that our young, Black and brown bodies are being uplifted? And I just kept seeing like these really horrendous reports. This is Stephon Watts, who was shot dead in Chicago city suburb at the age of 15, and then, Matthew Rushin, who is actually in jail right now, for basically being Black and autistic, sentenced to 50 years. I think that maybe that number has changed from when this article in the Post was written a few months ago. But the reason why this particular story is so personal to me is because, I've been in touch with the mother, and she's advocating, getting the Virginia governor on board to get this amazing kid out of jail. But the thing that like really frightens me is that he looks like my son. Like he's literally like, he's got the curly afro, he's got the big huge smile, he's the sweetest thing. And then so we're basically telling, our young autistic kids that this is almost what you have to look forward to. That if you are in a car accident, and that if that was, maybe brought on by like an anxiety attack, which is what happened, you're going to be put in jail. You're not going to be given the opportunity to defend yourself. You're not going to be given the adequate, medical care, or the adequate, support system while you're in prison, to make sure that your life is still valued, and that you have the opportunity to like leave prison and actually feel like you can get your life back, because he's not really getting what he needs. Matthew Rushin, I'm telling you, it's just, it's really upsetting. Make sure you research what's happening right now with his family. And so, more than half of Black people with disabilities in the United States will be arrested by the time they reach their late 20s, And so I provided a quote to the Washington Post saying, as a Black parent to a 7-year-old, Black autistic son, like my sole job is to preserve his present so that he can actually make it into the future. And if we're basically locking up or healing our Black disabled men, like what is that? What are we really saying to our Black disabled youth, our Black autistic youth? Like, what is that really, what are we really showing? Like, what hope are we showing our kids if we're telling them that they're completely disposable? So in response to, a lot of just the negative media, a lot of the oppression that the Black, disability community has experienced for, years, but now, like, as my son he's getting older, he's understanding, he's, being encouraged to accept himself. And I really wanted to just create a tribute to the disability community, basically a love letter to him, saying, this is how much we respect you and honor you as a kid, as an autistic kid, as a disabled kid. And this is, basically, like, as an artist, what mom wants to create to just amplify you, this is really what I want for him to see as he continues to grow, like being autistic. And I'm reading the a spread from the zine right now. So being autistic is being true to yourself in a world that would rather you be invisible. It's like, well, that's not my problem. He's over in this other classroom. Let's keep him separate, and let's not integrate him into the everyday classroom. These are things that we've had to really fight for within the school system, is making sure that his teachers create like a safe space in class where he can feel like, I can still be me. I don't have to be pulled out every 5 seconds. I can still take breaks, and I can still feel like I'm a part of the class. And so it's really been amazing. Like, his teachers have seen the zine. And he's been able to like really use this as a tool to communicate with other folks. And so wait, slideshow. Okay, so these are just some extra, just quick visuals. There's like a call to action in the zine that says, welcome to Knoxverse, where every family's experience is different, but the commonality is that our children are not burdens and did not ask for any of the challenges that they face. And they depend on those who love and equip them to be successful and to reinforce the fact that they are incredibly special and they don't need to be fixed. And I really wrote this as a result of seeing a lot of just negative language being used towards children who are disabled, and specifically from parents. And that just really made me upset. And I was like, if I'm gonna uplift and amplify my kid, I'm definitely not going to use very negative language that will impact their overall soul and happiness and existence. So these are just quick spreads from the zine. The zine led into other fun, product designs and stickers and things that we wanted to use to continue to just amplify the disability community. On the left-hand side is one of my autistic students, Nicholas, at Bowie State University. He's actually a theater major and he loves doing voiceovers. So he's all about connecting with folks to get into like broadcasting, and that's like really his thing. And so yeah, I mean, and I originally created these fun designs just for my family and my disabled friends, and then I have students walking into my office, and it's really cool being able to kind of use design to just have these really cool exchanges. And now like this kid like won't stop calling me. Like COVID, it's like we still speak through COVID, but when we were on campus, he was in my office every other day, and I miss him a lot. But he's also a kid who doesn't really have any documentation about his disability, and he grades his grades have been impacted because he doesn't want to get the accommodation letter because of the stigmas, and because of what he feels like, oh well, if I tell people that I'm autistic, then I'm not necessarily going to be embraced by school, by the students in my classroom, by the people that I want to interact with. And so I'm always encouraging him, like, you don't have to mask, like, be you, do you, and just every opportunity that I can take to just uplift him, like that's really what I do. And then I have other, students in class that are, this is an example of Haley, white autistic girl, amazing, how to overcome anxiety and autism. And they actually created like these little COVID little quarantines, and we mailed them to each other, and they got a chance to pick, topics that they wanted to talk a little bit about and like infuse like disability narrative. And again, it's just really about creating a safe space for the students to be able to feel like they can use like their own personal narrative, their own vulnerabilities to really, just amplify like their own journeys and their own work. And it gives me an opportunity to like share like the stuff that they're doing and get them internships and get them hired. Like that's the whole point, So, it's really just about building like all of this, disability activism won't make any sense unless I'm out in the community building, unless I'm, partaking and uplifting other families. So this is Autism Society of Baltimore, Art with a Heart, and art organization. And I do a lot of zine workshops with other autistic families and other neurodivergent, families, so that we can get together and like, just have a lot of fun, like create like these fun little booklets that amplify, like each of these kids had to create a zine that basically asked the question, how do I see me, breaking the cycles of unjust stigmas and autism. And so all of these families, they came together like as a unit to just hang out, make some zines that really just amplified and uplifted just who they are. And everybody was allowed to get up and pace and make noise and jump around the room for like 2-3 hours. And it was just a really cool space where they felt like they could just create artwork on their own terms and have an experience. And then, so Knox on the right-hand side is like with this one little, kid that he met for the first time, and they were taking Polaroids of each other. And here's another autistic family that I know from Baltimore. And again, like just the zine, Knox has been able to just meet up with all sorts of fun folks. This is John Marble from Pivot Diversity. which is a really great organization that offers just, autism at work consultancy, workshops. And so again, getting him out in the community, getting him involved with just more action-based work, it's just been a lot of fun. This past summer, we got into sharing free materials. I created this symbol. I mean, it's Black Disabled Lives Matter, just representing just resistance and disability, justice, infusing like just disability symbols in with the Black fist and amplifying Black lives and amplifying the names of Black disabled bodies who've been lost to state violence, as Carrie was mentioning. And I mean, this design was really meant to just live online. And then I ended up printing posters, meeting Carrie for the first time, hanging out in DC. It was like my first action through COVID. And I was like, man, it's time to work. It's time to get to work. And it's time to take design and art and to just use it to just create more relationships to empower the community. It was one of the funnest things I did this past summer. And here you can see folks of all different disabilities just rallying together, and just, I'm telling you, it was awesome. It was amazing. One of the best experiences, and that's really what the artwork is really meant to do for me. It's really meant to just, it's meant to make me feel like I can make a difference, and I can just continue to just uplift folks and to form like really solid relationships. And the artwork can continue to just travel, and it can continue to just be used as a tool to create change. And so it just kept going. It kept going. I made it as like a free downloadable graphic. Folks were taking the symbols and like stenciling it on the sidewalks. Berkeley Art Museum, used it as a really cool projection. This was not even planned, these t-shirts. This was just really like a request from people that I make them, and then it ended up just being a really beautiful, again, like wearing your resistance, almost kind of like a suit of armor, like the symbol is just, it ended up just becoming a really beautiful, positive light for a lot of folks. Barack Obama like retweeted like, this is just a prototype for a mural design that Carrie and I are hoping to get made soon. But that leads me to this, and so basically, because we couldn't necessarily infuse this physically when COVID was like hot, I mean, we were really concerned about bringing people together through COVID. So we put our heads together, and we were like, well, what can we still do to amplify, these names of 37 lives who've been lost to state violence? What can we still do to like uplift, these lives that meant so much and that have been stolen and taken from us, but still being able to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act, but still reminding people that with all this celebration, we still need to uplift those who are no longer with us, because what is all this celebrating for, if we can't honor these lives? So we decided to get together to continue to just amplify these names in a variety of different ways, stating stating their backstory, stating really fun things about them, but then also what happened and why they were taken, and then incorporating ASL, incorporating Braille, and then we just projected the names. This is actually like in my basement at home. I was like, and if I can't project these names on a wall, or if we're running out of time and we're trying to really amplify, to continue to amplify the artwork, let's just live stream it, And so on July 26th, the 30th anniversary, we projected these names. This is like actually in my basement. And I don't have a recording of it to play now, but it's available through my website. Like my son actually he narrated each name and he read each name as the Instagram live was actually going on. So it was really powerful. And that's him down there, just kind of hanging out. And so just to kind of end things, again, like Carrie was talking about, just continuing to encourage folks to show up as their true authentic selves, I would really love to get, this is something too that we can talk about. I would love to get Carrie's thoughts on Chadwick Boseman. And, the Washington Post ran a really great article. Chadwick Boseman's death, is fueling important conversations about disabilities and what's happening on the screen and behind the scenes, because a lot of people saying, oh, he was suffering and he was this, he was that. But he wanted to continue working. He wanted to continue to show up like as himself. And he wanted to continue just being him. And whether he chose to disclose it or whether he didn't, um, he still shouldn't be looked upon, as less than, he should still be looked upon as the superhero that he was. But then also, encouraging folks that it's okay, like, that they're going through these things and that they can identify and get the help that they need. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a very, interesting conversation, but I wanted to to continue to just amplify like just disability culture and how empowered we can continue to be and how we can continue to honor Chadwick. And this was, so I actually made this art piece in 2018 when Black Panther first came out, and I infused like, T'Challa, like, in Wakanda, like in Knox, and I like reposted it, like, when we lost Chadwick, it was just so heartbreaking. And man, like people were like, yes, Jen. And it was almost like Knox, like this autistic Black kid wearing like this cloak of like resistance, like this everything that Black Panther stood for and that Chadwick stood for, you know what I'm saying? And it was like, it's like a really interesting way that we can kind of continue that conversation going, how we just need to continue to just uplift, disability and Black disability, and to let people know that like I'm powerful, and I can be like emboldened by just being me. And so I was super happy and super honored that the Washington Post chose to run it, and I was able to talk a little bit about, just disability and superhero, and how, we shouldn't necessarily look at disability as being, we shouldn't be ashamed. We should, realize that who we are as disabled folks can just be so powerful. And Carrie and I would we've talked a lot about vulnerability and how just empowering that can be, and how folks can just be completely uplifted from our willingness to just be true and to be super honest. And so the FIST has navigated into voting, and I'm always looking for ways that I can just kind of like infuse, like, how can the FIST, how can like the solidarity symbol like continue to just evolve, and how can we remix it, how can we continue to keep it spreading, how can it continue to keep being spread. And so I made these posters free on my website so folks can download them, print them, frame them, and then also, use them online, so that, again, like disability culture can continue to be like infused in politics and in policy, because it's okay to kind of intermix the two. Like culture work is political work. So definitely follow me, keep up with me. I'm here. I'm excited. Thank you so much for holding space. And for just taking time to just appreciate the artwork, because right now it's just about just using artwork to just embolden folks and to really just like assemble. Thank you.
So dynamic, Jen, so dynamic, and just giving us so much to think about. Brandon, we'd like to turn the mic over to you now and hear what you have to say to follow up on our other panelists. Brendan Harris.
All right, hi, my name is Brandon. I use he, him pronouns. So thank you, Carrie and Jen. You both are like amazing. So you are two dope women, two dope Black women. So just want to let you all know that. For me and my story, I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome in March 1st, 2016. You do not know what Guillain-Barré syndrome is. It's a neurological disorder that affects the nervous system. And so how I got diagnosed with this condition is basically, I was presenting, actually, I was in grad school, my first year in grad school, second semester, presenting at my first regional conference. and I started getting my throat started getting sore, and I just lost my voice in the middle of a presentation. So I'm embarrassed. I'm trying to have my partner help me out. I'm thinking like, oh, it's just a sore throat, get over it a couple of days. I'm also not in the state of Arkansas. I'm in Waco, Texas. If you've ever been to Waco, Texas, it's nothing. It's very, very rural. I'll say that. And so didn't feel comfortable going to any healthcare provider. Just being queer Black man. I'm on Baylor's university campus. I don't feel really safe. So basically, being me at the time, I was like, I'll just wait it out, try to like get over it in 48 hours. Didn't happen. Start getting a fever, ended up getting diagnosed with strep. Next day, I took an antibiotic. The antibiotic basically caused me to fall in my house. Fell in my house, started getting these weird tingling feelings and from my feet to my legs. Every day I was losing something else, from losing the sense of touch, the smell. I had paralysis in my face. My face started drooping, looking like I had a stroke. Um, and then from then, thank God I had a Black woman from the Caribbean, Real Moore. She's my supervisor. And she's like, I'm going to take you to the hospital. She picked me up. Somehow she picked me up, took me in her car. And like Carrie said, like I went to 3 doctors in one day because they did not know what was going on. One said I had a stroke. One said I got bit by a mosquito because the Zika disease at the time in 2016 was linked to Guillain-Barré, so that's what they kept saying. And luckily, I was in one of the few states that actually treat Guillain-Barré syndrome. And took 48 hours. I had to get a spinal tap, EKG, all these different tests going on, and went through series of different conditions that they kept trying to diagnose me. It was like, nope, this not it. So anywho, basically, they told me I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, and then also they also tried to diagnose me saying, since I'm queer and I identify as queer man, they thought maybe I had HIV, and I'm like, how? Like there was just no way. Just because at the time I wasn't even sexually active, so it was just all these different stereotypes coming onto me due to how I identify, and not really trying to get to what's really going on, how I got to where I was at. And so basically I was bound to a wheelchair for around 4 months. Then I had to go learn how to walk again. So I was on a walker, had to do some speech as well because some of my speech was slurring. That's why sometimes I still mumble, just with some of the nerves. And then also, I had to take a break from grad school. And so the resilience part for me was I ended up going to the summer. That summer, I ended up taking 9 credits. And out of the 9 credits, I took 9 credits as a grad student. So that's a full load. If you all don't know, that's like 3 classes I took that summer doing the internship. I flew to Boston, Massachusetts, where I worked at Salem State University to do an internship. And once again, I was blessed to have an amazing supervisor who was also Greek. He's an IOTA Black man, Damien, who worked with me to get this internship, to keep the internship. Because my other internships that I did have going, they basically say, well, you're not able to move around campus, so we can't take you. And so Damien took a chance on me, had my walker with me in Massachusetts, and ended up learning how to walk again in Massachusetts, just moving around. And also the accessibility. I was talking to Nancy earlier about the accessibility of campuses and just about how it was so hard to move around. And even to this day, like walking on University of Maryland campus pre-pandemic for me was a challenge at times because my body still gets tired. I still get the tingling feelings. And so our campus is better than where I used to work at University of Tennessee, which is a Healy campus, but still about how inaccessible some of our campuses are at times, with the buildings and how old and so forth with accommodations. But anywho, basically with my condition, I have learned a lot about the intersectionality pieces that goes into who I am as a person. One of the reasons why I chose to work here at the University of Maryland's community is because one of my colleagues and I have a similar neurological condition. And so I actually confided in her and I was really scared because it was my first time confiding in someone in a job interview setting of this is who I am fully. And I'm thankful that the person never like shared that. I was like, I don't want that to be shared, but at the same time, like if this job was for me, it's for me. But I say all this to say, honestly, with the resilience pieces of what I have been through, um, really, if you are a student leader, really think about the accessibility at your programs. I work in fraternity story life, and we have a lot of issues going on, and we can be very inaccessible in so many ways. And so I always try to challenge the students I work with about the accessibility. Even I live in on Fraternity Row as well, and some of our houses are not accessible. Um, and I live in a house that is not accessible. And so I have already informed my supervisors that if there's a day where I relapse again, because I have relapsed twice since 2016, how is that going to affect me living in my house? Because luckily, when I was in Arkansas, I've stayed in the ADA compliant staff apartment. So even though even though like I got diagnosed and so forth, I didn't have to walk upstairs when I was in my wheelchair. I didn't have to have a lot of challenges at the time, but moving to here in Maryland, there are so many challenges. And so I think the accessibility is definitely key. And then also um, be very mindful. Jen, thank you about the Chadwick, bringing up the Chadwick conversation, like being mindful about how we're discussing people's image and appearance and so forth. Because for me, like I have memory issues with my condition. Sometimes, depending how tired I am, um, my face can droop at times. My walk can be a little different. And then even what's it called? Even when it comes to being sick and so forth with my illness, I can't get vaccines. Like I can't get the flu shot. And just be very mindful about how we are discussing about just about like vaccines right now and talking about even like how people are walking and so forth. Like just be very cautious and careful about that. Because I used to work with a group of student leaders at Tennessee with my RAs, and some RAs like, why are you huffing and puffing? You just walk down the street. And I'm like, yeah, 'cause I have a bad heart rate. Like my heart rate is very different from yours because of what I've been through and so forth. So just being very mindful of the conversations that you are having with one another. And like I was saying with my illness, I got sick maybe 2 weeks ago, and I shared this with Nancy. I got sick 2 weeks ago, and it took me like a week and a half to get over my virus I had. I didn't get COVID-19. I have a stomach virus, but it took a week and a half instead of like the normal 72 hours and so forth. And so just being very mindful of that. And that's pretty much my story. Today I just found out I was on the panel. So that's just want to share my story with you all. And also, if you do work in health, if you do know people in healthcare and so forth, also challenge them as well about how to show up with care and support. I had to be very intentional with my doctors after 2016 as well. I have a Black woman as a doctor here in the DMV who I trust. Just because I've been to so many other doctors and I had to go to a doctor for this and a doctor for that. And so it's really for me, I have lots of anxiety around the healthcare field and so forth. And then also just, what's the last thing? And about healthcare in general. I'm thankful for that, just because that's another inaccessibility we have right now in our country. And I think we are seeing it more with COVID-19. At the time when I got diagnosed with not COVID-19, sorry. When I got diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, I didn't have healthcare. So at my grad school, in my grad assistantship package, we didn't have healthcare as an option. I couldn't afford like the healthcare that, I think at the time, the Affordable Care Act, where we had to pay into, I couldn't afford that either. And so luckily I was able to get on Medicaid and qualify. But that was a struggle as well, being a Black man in Arkansas and going through everything, and I couldn't write at the time. And so having someone else do the documents for me and the process and helping me with that. And so those are just things that I just want to share with you all and be mindful of when you are discussing about people who are differently able and about their experiences. Because I think Jen shared about one of her students are not able to will not get the appropriate documentation or want to be documented. And I just had to share, I just got documented here at the university due to COVID-19. It's my first time ever doing it. I never want to ever put in paperwork because of like the stereotypes and because I didn't want to get treated differently, because I know I could do my job, and I've been working in this field for 4 or 5 years now. So I said that all to say, like, just be careful, not being careful, just show care and compassion when you're like discussing these topics and even interacting with others, but at the same time, just don't assume either. But that's all I have to say. So I'm just being mindful of time.
Brendan, thank you. Thank you for being mindful of the time, and don't ever apologize. That's all I have to say. That was powerful. That was valuable, and we're very, very grateful. And you really were extraordinarily brave to step up and do this today. Okay, hey, can we get some questions in the chat, please? Let me start with one that came in early. Carrie, I think this was directed to you. Is it inclusive to use idioms like dope that not everyone may understand? We think of code switching as fitting in, but isn't it also about being understood by diverse audiences?
Yeah, I mean, one, I would say that code switching is very natural, right? So I grew up in a Christian faith, a Christian background, and there's certain phrases that you use when you're talking to folks in that nature. I can talk about, he won't put more on you than you can handle. I'll talk about like all things, there's just so many different things, right? But when I talk to my best friend who's agnostic, like my code switching, my language is different. Right? The issue that we're discussing is when code switching completely tries to erase your culture. And that's the issue that we've been seeing in particularly predominantly white industries and organizations, where there's some code switching, there's some slang that's appropriate, and there's some that is like, leave that over there. We don't want it. And there becomes this like natural inclination that when you use language that is the reflection of Blackness and communities of color, it's faced by a different standard, right? And so people might not understand when I use acronyms like ODEP. They might not understand when I use acronyms with all the different DC slangs that exist here, but people still use them, and you ask questions, you get to learn about it, and you get to start to incorporate that in your language or communication. But for some reason, when Blackness comes up, people don't like that. So we're trying to create environments that do not discredit communities of color, that do not discredit disabled folks, that talk about, there were a couple of examples of medical terminologies and slang and how deep you go into a conversation that gets excluded. And we want to think about workplaces that are open to mostly marginalized identities.
Thank you. Let me read another question. Can you all talk about that fine line between persistence and toxic resilience? The pressure to continue going even when your body wants to stop. Seems like the idea of resilience and strength is something we constantly tie to both Blackness and disability. Who wants to go? It's a great question.
I'll just share that. I don't have like the best, probably like the best like answer, but I think from my from my lived experience of knowing my boundaries and knowing my body, learning about that, and then also not actually I never tell other people, like other queer folks, other different able folks, or other Black people about being resilient all the way, like saying like you have to continue to be resilient, you got to continue to keep pressing on. I always tell people about knowing your boundaries, because that's very important in this work. Even for me, I went to 2 protests at the beginning of the summer, and I said I had to stop because I knew my body. I saw COVID. I'm compromised immune. I was like, I can't. Like the numbers will just continue going up, and so for me, like, yes, I like the idea of resilience. And at the same time, I hate the word grit. Like I just do not like the whole grit teaching. Um, that's the grit teaching. What K to 12 education usually try to teach to marginalized folks, in particular about grit. I just don't like it because I feel like it's kind of just teaching like, yeah, you have all these things that are on you, but like you have to continue to push on through and be like the gritty person or whatever. And also, I got recommended at Tennessee because I taught a leadership course, and it had a whole section about grit, and I was just like, we're gonna throw the grit out the window because we're not gonna teach this. We're gonna teach more like we could teach a little bit about resiliency and persistence in a healthy way. But like for me, teaching my students is like knowing your boundaries in anything you're doing in your work, and teaching more about caring for yourself and loving yourself, and actually unlearning some of those things about grit and resilience. Because I think sometimes we just always try to throw that to a person of color, a person who's different able, like, oh, continue to keep pushing. Like so many people when I was in my wheelchair at the time, like, oh, you're gonna get there one day, you're gonna get there one day, keep pushing. And I'm like, no, like that actually is pissing me off deep down inside. But I'll let my other 2 panelists say about this as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
either
wanna,
on that one or Jen, there's another question for you. Carrie, you wanted to go get in on this one?
sorry, I just wanted to add a small piece on this and just say how real that is. I see this in the Black community a lot. I see this in the disability community a lot of like, we are constantly trying to prove our worth. And I feel like we are constantly trying to show people I'm not one of the weak ones. I'm not one of the lazy ones. And I don't even think it's conscious. I think it's the ways in which we witness my parents, my dad. I never saw him took off work unless it was something particularly for family, right? Internalized ableism, Jen. Yeah. One of my students hit me up the other day and she was like, I'm trying to make it to this meeting, but I'm so sick. What do I do? And I was like, girl, take your day off. You know, like it's really hard, I think, for us to understand the difference between not giving up on our responsibilities and rejecting some of the sense of urgency that folks will put on us, right? Like sometimes you don't have to do it today. You can do it tomorrow. So I think like we have to, I really like what Brandon was describing in the sense of we have to think about, you know, like that balance of time, of urgency, of grit, and just acknowledge like we're gonna get it done, but it may not be today. So.
Hey, Jen, can you explain internalized ableism?
Yeah, and just to piggyback from what our amazing panelists were saying, you know, sometimes we feel like, right, like we can't necessarily show certain elements of that, you know, of those pieces of ourselves. And even sometimes, like, I'll tell people, oh, like, well, I have undiagnosed ADHD, almost as if like I'm using it as an excuse, where versus like, no, it's an explanation so that you can understand how I am, how I act differently, how I express myself differently. And then oftentimes the internalized ableism component is related to what Carrie was saying, like, oh, like, I hope they don't think I'm lazy. I hope they don't think I'm moody. I hope they don't think I'm the angry Black woman, you know, and it's, and a lot of it is related to these aspects of oppression that we put on ourselves. Um, that is just perpetuating the oppression, you know, instead of just, you know, letting the world know, look, this is how I am, these are the accommodations that I need, and it's not an excuse, it's an explanation, and you need to accept me fully, because I'm coming to you with truth and with authenticity. And so I feel like it's definitely, it's not an overnight thing, like it's something that, you know, disabled folks will continue to just, you know, grapple with. But I definitely agree with everyone's sentiments about, we don't feel like we have to like push forward or the need to prove it to ourselves, because that's just an act of oppression that is just going to continue to just weigh us down.
That's great, Jen. Hey, there's another question here that I think is interesting because, in terms of just struggling with the language we're supposed to use, someone says, why do you think the term special needs is used to identify children with disabilities rather than just saying disabled or disability?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I'm glad that it came up, and it continues to be like a debate among educational circles. And I don't respond. I mean, I don't refer to my son as special needs, even though that's kind of like the canon language. But his need to get up and take a break, his need to get up and take deep breaths to calm himself. To me, those are things that even able-bodied people or neurotypical people can actually do. Like, those aren't special needs. Like, those are just needs to be able to just, those are just mechanisms, like methodologies to keep yourself like whole and to keep your space centered. And so those are things that that those are things that he practices along with like his other peers. I don't necessarily think that disability is a dirty word. I don't think that it's anything to be ashamed of. I definitely feel like, it's up to the person if they want to like identify as disabled. I mean, I know for a long time, and I know that my other panelists can attest to this, like, oftentimes, like in the past, like we've had to really battle because of the spaces that we're in, and we're concerned, we're worried, is my true authentic self going to be uplifted and accepted? But again, like, I think that the more, I mean, I haven't even really referred to myself as ADHD until the past year. And the minute that I decided to tell my students, they were like, "Professor." They were like, "Thank you so much. Like, I have ADHD as well." And for me, like, to get up in front of the class, to me, that's an example that I can actually manage it, and I can actually like be about my business and get it done. And that I can still exist as like my true authentic self, and I don't mask. And when I'm with my students, I'm very transparent, and it's a very open space. And I want for them to feel the same way, especially now. Like, we're living in this virtual world. We're not like in a physical space anymore. They already feel like so disconnected. So it's like, if I can't even come forth as my true self, I can't really expect that from them. So to answer that question, it's a pet peeve of me, and I don't think that my son is special, and I don't think, I mean, he's amazing, he's dope, he's beautiful, you know what I mean? And I definitely don't feel like ashamed of his disability, and I don't want for him to feel that way either. Because if I'm telling him, "No, please do not refer to yourself as an autistic man," like, but he's like, "But mom, he's not gonna be cured." Like, and I don't, there, you know what I'm saying? And autism isn't about for advocating or trying to find a cure. It's about, this is me, like, this is who I am, and he's going to continue to be an autistic adult, so yeah, I'm very much about identity first, language.
And, we have like 1 minute left, but all of you referred in various ways to the stigma that impedes people from getting the services, the programming, even the diagnosis that they need. And I see this on our campus, and it troubles me greatly. A final comment on some aspect of, what can we do to promote the eradicating the stigma?
That's a big question.
Sorry.
I think that one of the things that I feel like we're on our way. Like, there's a lot that definitely needs to be done. But when I look at the efforts of the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, the disability justice movement, when I look at the ways in which we are pushing and not asking, but demanding for this to be addressed, I see how folks are on a pathway of saying, I want to be my fullest, most authentic self. I get tired of hiding. Growing up in Texas, I love that you mentioned Texas, Brandon, because I wore jeans, long pants, in 100-degree weather every day, every summer, trying to hide who I was. And it was the most freeing experience to get to the point where I was just like, I am who I am. And best believe I'm still on that journey. But again, I think if we keep pushing for us to have this dialogue, if we keep being a part of the movement, whether in person or virtually or whatever the case may be, like, we're gonna get there.
Well, I think we better wrap it up, recognizing, respecting the commitment of all of our panelists as well as our participants. This has been as path-breaking and as impactful as I anticipated that it would be. I am so deeply, deeply grateful to you, Carrie and Jen, for the work that you've been doing in very public spaces about Black Disabled Lives Matter, promoting both racial justice as well as disability justice. I look forward to any opportunities to continue to work with you all on these movements. Brandon, once again, an incredibly valiant effort coming forward at the last minute and really finding your voice about disability on our campus. To all our participants, thank you for your attention. Thank you so much for the interest in this. I think this is an issue we need to continue to pursue on our campus. I look forward to being a part of that, initiative, that project. We'll continue to promote it through the Career Center. So good night to all of you. Thank you once again.